Richard Petty Motorsports has sold majority stake to GMS Racing. Kevin Harvick was considering retirement after the 2021 season, and 23XI paid StarCom Racing a hefty amount of money for their charter. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off in New Hampshire Motor Speedway. As taking a look at the photos, it looks like New Hampshire Motor Speedway is revitalizing their dirt track for the 2022 season. For those of you who don't know, New Hampshire Motor Speedway does have a dirt track and has sit dormant for the last couple of years, and they've not raced there for the last couple of years. I'm going to assume COVID had a big factor into why they were not able to have dirt racing up in the New Hampshire area, but it's really cool to see that the New Hampshire Motor Speedway dirt track is going to be returning for the 2022 season. My question is, what kind of racing is going to be able to go out there? That's something that is going to be determined down the road. But I think that this is really awesome. This is some really great news. And I'm really happy to see that New Hampshire Motor Speedway has revitalized their dirt track. I think it's great to see that dirt track racing is continuing to get a major presence in motorsports. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Matt Tifft. As Matt Tifft has been named as part of the Forbes Under 30 class for the 2022. This is really cool. Matt Tifft is one of the owners of Live Fast Motorsports. There was a lot of really cool entrepreneurs who are under the age of 30, people that I know, not personally, but a lot of people that I respect that are really getting into that group. And the fact that Matt Tifft is getting into that group is really awesome to see. I think Matt Tifft has had a team that's been coming up. I really hope that Live Fast Motorsports does take major steps for next year so they can show what they're able to do. But I think that this overall is really exciting for this team's future, and to see that Matt Tifft got onto the Forbes Under 30 class is something that I think is really excellent, something that is really exciting. And again, I'm really happy about this. I think that this is really awesome, and I'm really happy to see that Matt Tifft got onto the list. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a look at the Atlanta repave. The Atlanta repave, there's been some photos that have been surfacing. Atlanta Motor Speedway has from time shown some of the status of the Atlanta repave, and as you can see in the photos, the front stretch is very wide, and that's something that's going to be very interesting to see when we go back there next year. The first race in Atlanta, I think, is in the 4th or 5th race of the season in the middle of March. So the repave, I think, is very interesting. A lot of people have been vocally against the repave, but it does look interesting. But at the same time, I am very worried that things could end up going wrong here. We may end up seeing 4 or 5 wide down the straightaway. That's something I am extremely worried about going into next year. But maybe I'll be wrong and proven wrong. Maybe we'll see some really good racing, but I'm not entirely sure if that is going to entirely be the case, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tootsie's. Tootsie's is going to be sponsoring Daniel Suarez once again in 2022. And instead of only having just one race for 2022, he's actually going to have 6 races for the 2022 season with it, where they'll be sponsoring him for the Daytona 500, for both Bristol races, the Bristol Dirt and the Bristol Night Race, both Talladega races, and the Nashville Super Speedway race. Tootsie's as a company is a bar in the Nashville area. It's been a bar that's been around for a very long time, and they're gaining association with Daniel Suarez. First of all, car looks absolutely amazing. I think it's probably been the best one we've seen so far with the new next-gen placement of the number places. I'd rather see the car in the center, number to center, but I do think it has been growing on me, and this one I think they've done a really good job. I do think some paint schemes with the new number placement have not worked out very well. This one is an exception. I think they overall did an extremely good job on the Tootsie's look at the car. I think that this is a really good move, and I'm really happy to see that Tootsie's is going to continue sponsoring Daniel Suarez next year for 6 races. I'm wondering if some of the sponsors that did not sponsor Daniel Suarez this year, the Kyle Sykes design, I wonder if they're going to be going over to sponsor Ross Chastain for next year. That's something they're going to have to wait and see. But I think that this is overall really awesome. I'm glad to see that they have extended their sponsorship, and it will grow their sponsorships for next year in 2022. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Hooters. As Hooters is extending its 3-race primary sponsorship on Chase Elliott through the 2024 season. For 2022, there are 3 races that are going to be the primaries, are the Gateway Race, the Bristol Night Race, and the Vegas far as. First of all, I'm very happy to say this because I'm going to be at Gateway. I'm really happy to see that the Hooters car is going to be at Gateway. I get to see that car in person. I've generally been a big fan of the Hooters cars, but it's also really cool to see that Hooters is continuing their overall partnership with Hendrick Motorsports. I think to have a company like that continue their partnership with Hendrick Motorsports is really, really awesome. They've had their partnership with Hendrick, I think, since around 2016 when Chase Elliott joined the NASCAR Cup Series, and they've been with them around 2016 and 2017, and they have Hooters continue sponsoring through 2024. This also confirms at least that Chase Elliott is probably going to be with the team through 2024. We do not know what's going on with the contract for Chase Elliott. His contract right now only goes through 2022. However, it's very, very likely that he's going to get a pretty big long-term extension. It's probably going to be remaining in NASCAR a very, very, very long time. I mean, he is a guy that just won the championship in 2020, and there's been also rumors he may be able to buy into ownership stake into the organization, which I think is definitely really, really interesting. So, really awesome to see the Hooters is continue their sponsorship for next year with Chase Elliott, and really happy to see that they are staying with the Hendrick Motorsports camp next year. I think that this overall is a great story, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR and Ohio. Now, we talked about this about a month ago, that Ohio has been trying to get money from NASCAR in regards to their taxing on broadcast. Well, it was reported by the Associated Press that the Ohio Supreme Court will hear NASCAR's challenge of tax on broadcast. Like I said a second ago, for about a month ago, basically, Ohio's been challenging NASCAR due to the amount of money they're not getting the money when it comes to broadcast. And why is this really, really important? Well, this could have a major, major impact on the future if NASCAR is wanting to continue their partnership in the Ohio area. Because if this does not end up going through and NASCAR has to pay a hefty fine for it, NASCAR may just consider leaving the Ohio area, which could unfortunately affect Mid-Ohio. Now, it won't affect this year because it's already been announced that Mid-Ohio is going to be on the NASCAR Camp World Truck Series schedule, not the Xfinity Series schedule this year. But for the Truck Series, they'll be racing at Mid-Ohio this year. So this is a case that I think we really do need to keep an eye on. I'm very surprised that no one's really covered this story. It's something that I think that definitely needs to be covered because I think that this overall is a major, major story. And this story we definitely keep an eye on for sure. And again, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the broadcast money and the tax money. I completely understand it. But at the same time, I think it's a little crazy too. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to this case. But I think it's really, really interesting, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NFTs and Next League. It was reported a couple days ago by Adam Stern that NASCAR signed up to become a client of new consulting firm Next League that will advise leagues and teams in sports on the metaverse, which is Web3, crypto, blockchain, NFTs. NFTs have become extremely popular over the next couple years. I'm not overall the biggest fan of NFTs. I am somewhat of a big fan of crypto. I've never invested in the crypto, but I am somewhat a big fan of cryptocurrencies. Crypto has become a major, major currency, and it's becoming more popular than the dollar bill. And the dollar bill is eventually going to go away anyways, and crypto is probably eventually long-term going to become a thing that becomes very, very popular. But again, it's very interesting that they are investing in the NFTs and stuff. They're going toward the future. We've seen them, I think, somewhat get involved in the NFTs. We saw that at Bristol, where Bristol basically started investing in the NFTs, and we're starting to see NASCAR get involved more. We've seen teams and drivers like Firm Motorsports, the leads, gotten involved in that. Roush Keselowski Racing, has gotten involved in that, among other teams that have gotten involved into that. So I do think overall it's definitely really, really interesting as a whole that NASCAR is getting involved in NFTs now to this day, and we'll wait and see if more comes out about this really, really soon. But I find the story really, really interesting, and maybe we'll hear more about it soon. But this is definitely really interesting that NASCAR overall is getting involved in NFTs, among other things. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the most popular driver awards for the 2021 season. Let's start off with the NASCAR Cup Series, as with no surprise, Chase Elliott for the 4th consecutive year won the most popular driver award. For the NASCAR Xfinity Series, Justin Allgaier won it. I believe he won it last year too. And I think this is like the 10th or 11th straight year that Junior Motorsports has won. I think they've won it every year since 2011. So Justin Allgaier won the Xfinity Series one. And for trucks, no surprise here, Hailie Deegan was the winner of the Truck Series fan vote. Let's first start off with the Truck Series. Hailie Deegan does not surprise me. She has a major, major presence and a major following on social media, and she's going to bring a lot of female fans, among other fans, into the sport. And we saw the Truck Series have huge increase in ratings here. And I think a lot of that increase in ratings this year was not because of the Fox broadcasting. Let's be for real. The Fox broadcasting this year was absolutely terrible. The reason that we saw increase in ratings is because of Hailie Deegan. So no surprise that she was the most popular. She's got a big big presence and also really, really big following on social media. Let's look at the Deegan family channel and look at her YouTube channel. She's got like 400 to 500,000 subscribers, which I wish I had, but really interesting on that. For the Xfinity Series, Justin Allgaier does not surprise me. Justin Allgaier, I think, is a very, very respectful driver. He's a driver that's done very, very well. I'm very surprised that Noah Gragson was not considered for that, but Justin Allgaier is a very, very clean driver, has a lot of respect from a lot of his peers, and overall a lot of fans as well, and a very, very clean driver, so no surprise there. For the Cup Series, come on, Chase Elliott is the most popular driver even to this day. Now, I was very intrigued to see, again, they did not this year release any of the top fives, which I found weird, considering that I think that Chase Elliott was probably going to win it. But I was wondering if Kyle Larson was going to be really, really close. And I think that this year, at least for the Cup Series-wise, I would not have been shocked if it was very, very possible that in this season, that if Chase Elliott had a really, really close competition from Kyle Larson's. Kyle Larson's fan base, I think, has definitely grown over this year. One, because Kyle Larson has dominated this year, and a lot of people really, some people enjoy dominance, others don't enjoy dominance. But I do overall find it interesting that Chase Elliott won, but I'm very intrigued to see what were the other top five, because again, I would have been surprised if Bubba was in there, even though Bubba's a very polarizing driver. He still does have a lot of fans and probably brought some of those new fans into sports. So I wish they would have given us the top five. I think that would have been something that would have been really cool to see. And I think it's something that would have been really, really important to take a look at. But that is your most popular driver award ballots for 2021. And now we're going to go into the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Snowball Derby Pro Mod truck race that happened last night. And yes, this is something that's been talked about over the evening, and I saw the crash. So, during the Snowball Derby Pro Mod truck race, there was 3 laps to go, and there was a battle that was going on between Steven Davis and I believe it was Hunter Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, was the name of the guy that got involved in this situation. Steven Davis gets loose off of the corner going to turn before, coming to 3 laps to go, and then Hunter Johnson gives him a bump. Typical short track racing, you're going to bump somebody. That's something that is going to happen, especially late into the event. Well, coming down the front stretch, Steven Davis decides to literally intentionally rider him down the straightaway. He comes back up the track. I don't remember the other guy's name. I think the guy's name was John Hall. Basically, he careens into John Hall, flips up, and hits the catch fence, and ends up on his wheel upside down into the outside wall. And I want to talk about this more, because let's talk about type of racing. Now, very lucky for him, he was able to walk away. However, update on the situation, Hunter Johnson, he posted on his Facebook this morning that he has really, really bad back pain and he has an L3 fractured vertebrae. First of all, let's talk about this. Steven Davis should 100% be banned from racing, 100%. At least for sure be suspended indefinitely for a very, very long time from racing, because what he did there was unacceptable. I can understand giving a bump and run into somebody, but literally rearing down someone down the straightaway, I don't care what type of track it is, whether it's a road course, intermediate track, whatever type of track, it does not matter what type of track you're running at. You do not rear somebody down the freaking straightaway. It's just unacceptable in my honest opinion. And we've talked about this, that this is, if this kind of racing continues in any type of racing, someone is going to get killed. And we're very, very lucky that Hunter Johnson was not killed last night. He almost died last night because of some stupidity from a driver being upset and having a short temper. And I am very surprised that there was nothing handed to him. And I would have not been surprised if they pressed charges against Steven Davis, because honestly, it's unacceptable to do this kind of shit. It pisses me off that this kind of stuff happens in racing. Rivaling somebody is a rule. I don't know if it's a rule in stock car racing, but if it's an unwritten rule, it needs to become a rule. But unwritten rule is that you do not rival somebody down the straightaway. I remember, I think it was last year, that Justin Haley got a 2-lap penalty because of Riley Herbst, even though he got a contact. Riley Herbst down the straightaway at Pocono got a 2-lap penalty. I was pissed at the time, but I understand why NASCAR gave that penalty. You do not right-rear somebody down the straightaway. That, in my opinion, is the most ridiculous thing you can do in motorsports. So that definitely something that really, really pissed me off. Something that definitely frustrating. And I do understand why people were upset. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's BS and really ridiculous that there was no repercussions. Again, there needs to be repercussions for it. And I hope drivers saw that and realized, hey, we can't be right-rearing people down the straightaway. That's something that needs to be changed overall and needs to happen very quickly and very, very soon. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about FlowSports in NASCAR. As it was announced yesterday, that NASCAR and FlowSports have announced a multi-year partnership that will become home of NASCAR roots. Now, the cost for the whole year is going to be $150 a year, but you're going to get a ton of programming next year. I believe you're going to be getting 280 racing events next year, which includes the main ARCA Menard Series, ARCA West, and the ARCA East, all the Wheel and Modified Tour Series races, the Penny Series, and all of the AutoZone Weekly Series races that happen. This, in my opinion, is a really, really big partnership. A lot of the programming that was on NASCAR, I don't remember what's the NBC. NBC had their own thing, and unfortunately that's shutting down with NBC Sports shutting down. Their programming is shutting down, and it's going over to FlowSports. FlowSports is becoming the speed channel. They have a lot of other really, really cool events they have under. They have dirt racing events, other late model events that go under, and now they're going to have this. And I think that you're going to see a lot of major people go out there and subscribe to it, and a huge influx from FlowSports. I think that this is a really, really good deal. Again, I maybe would have charged a little bit less than $150 for this, but at the same time, you're getting a ton of programming. It really isn't the end of the world, and it is cheaper than getting YouTube TV and other programming and cable. You're still saving a ton of money. If you're not wanting to watch me in NASCAR because of the frustration you have with it, but you're wanting to go out and watch FlowSports and stuff, I think you have that opportunity to do that now. So I think that overall, this is very, very awesome. I think this is really, really cool. And I'm overall happy that this happened, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that this is really, really awesome. And now we're going to go ahead and jump onto the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about the burnouts on Broadway that happened on, I believe it was Wednesday evening. So, starting off with the Boulevard burnouts on Broadway, it rained before the event began. So, they delayed it to start, and then NASCAR decided to be peak NASCAR, and they brought jet dryers out to dry the streets. Talk about being peak NASCAR right there, where you go out there and dry the streets. Despite it being on the street, they went out and used jet dryers. Some of the most notable things that happened during the burnouts at Broadway. Alex Bowman tried to do a burnout. He lost it. He felt embarrassed, but I think eventually he was able to do a burnout later. He felt embarrassed about it. At the same time, man, sometimes you're in the pressure, even though it's after the season's over. Sometimes you feel the pressure and you have a lot of people watching you. It can be definitely frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating, though, also at the same time. They weren't even able to do a burnout, considering he won 4 races this year, but I think it was really, really cool to see that. Denny Hamlin, he hit the outside wall, was able to keep going and was able to be a badass in that. So he's able to recover from that and put on a really, really awesome show, in my opinion, from his burnout. Penske had a triple burnout, and it was really, really cool to see. They had a trifecta. I think it was Bragzowski in the middle. You had Joey Logano on the outside and Brian Blaney on the inside. They were all doing burnouts together. I thought that was really, really fun and really, really entertaining scene. It's all the last time that these two are going to be working together, as Bragzowski is going to be going over to RFK Racing in 2022. And then finally, the most notable thing was the champion, Kyle Larson, actually had his father in the car, and then he transferred the wheel over to his father. So that was really, really cool to see. The burnouts on Broadway, man, have become something really, really awesome to see. They used to do it at Las Vegas, but they didn't have them last year because of COVID-19, and now it's officially returned this year. And I think the tradition of Nashville and NASCAR is something that I think is going to continue for a very, very long time. And I think that this is really, really awesome to see. And I was happy to see the burnouts of all of Broadway got to return to series. I think that if you can have something like this return long term, I think overall is really, really better. So I think that this is really, really awesome. I'm happy to see that this event went off without a hitch. It was really, really cool to see that this got to go through. And now we're going to go ahead and jump onto the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Nice Motorsports. As Nice Motorsports has announced a deal for the Gateway Dirt Nationals. The big thing is, the winner of the Super Late Model race will be awarded a driver's seat at Nice Motorsports at Knoxville later this year. So like I said, the winner of this event is going to be the driver of one of the Nice Motorsports cars, which tells me that they are going to have 4 trucks next year. Unclear if they're going to have a rotation drivers like a Ross Chastain or Kyle Larson, which a lot of people are probably saying that Kyle Larson should have been at this Gateway Dirt Nationals event to be in the Super Late Model event. But I mean, he's celebrating a championship. He's not going to go out there into a Super Late Model event and go to Gateway Dirt Nationals, even though he's a big fan of racing, for basically trying to go out there and, basically be crowned a champion and be at the awards banquet. But I think that this is a really, really cool initiative that Nice Motorsports is doing, and I think that whoever wins the event, it really, really deserves it, in my opinion. So I'm very intrigued to see. I know that Nice Motorsports in the past has had a lot of dirt drivers get into their seats. Last year, I think I don't remember who they had last year. They had Kyle Larson in one of their cars, and among other drivers that were able to compete in this. But I think that this overall is really, really awesome to see that Nice Motorsports is doing this initiative. I think overall it's a really cool deal, in my opinion, that they are doing this, because I think it is big overall for the sport if you can bring people in and bring insight into that. So I think this is a really, really awesome initiative that Nice Motorsports is doing, and I'm very intrigued to see who wins, because I believe the main event is either tomorrow, today, or Sunday. There are notes going on right now as we speak, so I think it actually is tomorrow night. It's the finales for all three major series dirt modifieds. I know Scott Bloomquist is going to be competing in the main event, and I'm very intrigued to see if he's going to be competing in other events. So if he's able to do that, he'll probably be one of the drivers that has an opportunity to compete in that. But I do think that this is a really, really cool deal, and I'm happy to see that Nice Motorsports is doing this initiative, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As Kevin Harvick was originally supposed to make his Cup Series debut in 2001, because he was actually on the Dale Jr. Down and talked about this, and he said he was originally supposed to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut in the 30 car at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and not actually in the 29 car, in the 3 car. He actually only was supposed to take 7 starts in 2001 if Dale Sr. had not passed away, or another driver we'll talk about in here in a second was going to take that ride. Kevin Harvick was going to drive the 30 car for 7 races in 2001. And Rossi already actually talked to Rick Mast about replacing Dale Earnhardt after he had passed away, but Rick Mast unfortunately declined that opportunity to get into the car. Now, I see people bringing up, do you think that Kevin Harvick probably could have had a chance to still win that event in that 30 car? Absolutely. Kevin Harvick is a world-class talent, and it doesn't matter what car he got into. He was really, really fast, and I think RCR was actually getting better around 2001, when Dale, around the time that it was 2001, they were really starting to show major signs of improvement. But very interesting that Rick Mast was considered. I would have thought maybe another driver, like another free agent, was going to be considered. But man, it would have been really cool to see Rick Mast get an opportunity in a top-tier car, because Rick Mast had not been in a top-tier car in years. He had been in the 26 car back in the 90s and all other years, but I think that had been really cool to have him in that car. But we now know the history of Kevin Harvick, and he got the opportunity to drive full-time and got his first career win. And that actually was supposed to be his debut at Atlanta Motor Speedway, the race he won. So I think that's actually really, really cool, really, really awesome overall for sure. And I'm happy to see that, and I'm really not happy to see, but I'm really was very intrigued to see what happened. Really cool overall story, to be perfectly honest with you. As I'm currently editing today's video, it's just been revealed that Parker Retzlaff will be making 10 Xfinity Series starts for RSS Racing in 2022. The number, though, has not been announced for Parker Retzlaff for 2022. We already knew at this point RSS Racing was planning to do 2 full cars next year, with Ryan Sieg running full-time. It was unclear, though, if they were going to have 2 cars for next year with 2 full-time drivers, or if that second car was going to be a part-time car. We now 100% have confirmation that that is going to be the case. To give a backstory on Parker Retzlaff made 1 ARCA start in 2021, where he did not get a top 10, but he only made 1 start and then finishing 11th. That's pretty respectful considering it was his only start. I think that came at Charlotte Motor Speedway. He made 6 out of 8 starts this year in the ARCA E, I think it was ARCA East Series this year. Had 1 top 5 and 4 top 10s for Bruce Cook. Honestly, that's not too bad, to be perfectly honest. It's not amazing statistics, but it's not too bad. So I think the expectations of Parker Retzlaff, who's only about 18 years old, by the way, so that's someone that's coming up to the race who's going to be really, really young. The goal for him, just gain as much experience as possible, don't get in driver's ways, and don't cause problems. But I do think it's really, really awesome. He's going to be making his Xfinity Series debut next year. It's really cool to see that we're going to see a younger driver come up to the series next year in 2022. Really awesome to see this, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tate Fogleman. As Tate Fogleman is going to be going to On Point Motorsports in 2022, driving the number 30 truck. For those of you who don't know, Tate Fogleman has driven a 12 truck for Jones Motorsports for the last couple years, and actually this year, despite basically dumping John Nemechek for the win, he got his first career NASCAR Camp World Truck Series victory at Talladega Super Speedway. His average finish in 2021 was a 24.7 average finish, which isn't really that impressive, but you have to know that Young's Motorsports trucks are overall not the best equipment to get into. That being said, though, this is a little bit of an upgrade for him, which he'll be getting into next year. And this will be his first full-time season with a little bit of a better car. We've seen Brendan Poole get in the car in the past and run pretty consistently. I do think Tate Fogleman has somewhat of talent. I know that, like I said, he dumped John or Nemechek for the win at Talladega, but he does have somewhat of talent. So I'm very intrigued to see how he's going to do next year in this 30 car. This is definitely a really, really big upgrade for him in some ways, because I think Toyota is probably going to somewhat get involved with this team for next year. So my goal, what are my expectations for Tate Fogleman going to next year in this 30 truck? I think the goal for Tate Fogleman is he needs to 100% finish as many races inside the top 20 and do the best he can to get more experience in this 30 trucks. If he can do really, really well in this truck, he'll probably get more really, really cool opportunities. But I think the goal for him going to next year, he needs to 100% finish, at least for sure, inside the top 20 as many times as he can. I think he'll get some top 10s next year in that 30 truck. We've seen that 30 truck at once be capable of getting top 30s, including at Martinsville when Danny Bones ran in top 10 and top 15 at certain points. But I think that this is definitely really, really cool and really, really interesting as a whole, that Tate Fogleman is going to be going to On Points Motorsports in 2022. Hopefully he'll do very, very well next year. I think this is a little bit of an upgrade, and I'm very happy to see that he is getting an opportunity at a pretty decent ride for next year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump onto the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the next-gen test at Phoenix, as it was revealed that a portion of the grandstands is going to be open to fans free for charge for the next-gen test on January 25th from 10 to 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Phoenix time, which is for Eastern time, I believe is 1 p.m. to around 8 p.m. Eastern. Subject to change, the teams will have 1 to 2 cars per organization. This test will be moved from December 15th to 17th and is being moved to January 25th and 26th. Really awesome to see the fans are going to be allowed to get into this. I'm very intrigued to see if there's other tests like the Daytona test that's going to be happening early January. I'm very intrigued to see if fans are going to be allowed in that test. I'm on the other tests. I don't think any of the upcoming Charlotte tests fans are going to be allowed to get into just because of the Christmas decorations. I don't think fans are going to be allowed to get into that. But I'm really happy to see that fans are going to overall be allowed to go out to this next-gen test to see the car. There was a test, I think the Roval test fans were allowed to go to that after the Roval race happened in November, and I think some people, Noah Cornelius was out there among a couple other people. There weren't many people that went to it, but there were still people that were able to go to that, and I think that the fact that they are going to allow a portion of grandstands open, and basically no pricing, no admission is free and everything, is a good thing overall for the fans, that are not going to charge anything, and it's really, really cool in my opinion that fans are going to be allowed, and you don't have to have a ticket from the previous race to get into that. So I think that is something that is really, really awesome as a whole, that you're going to be able to go check out the next-gen test at Phoenix, and I think it's awesome. I think that if people can be able to go check the next-gen car, considering the first race for the next-gen car is literally less than 2 weeks after that, and we're getting closer to the start of Season 2, I think that's really, really cool, and I'm happy to see that fans will be able to go check out the next-gen test. And we're also very intrigued to see what the racing will be like with the smaller ovals, if they're going to run the 670 horsepower package or a higher horsepower package. That's something that is to be determined down the road, but I think it is really awesome that the next-gen test fans are going to be allowed to go check that out. Now we're going to go ahead and jump onto the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about tape on the next-gen cars. Now, Robert Yates was on, Doug Yates was on the SiriusXM NASCAR radio, and he says that teams will not be allowed to put tape on the noses of the next-gen cars. Basically said that those decisions are going to be coming before the races begin. They will not see tape on the next-gen pit stops. This is definitely really, really interesting. And from what we hear, apparently the reason is because of the intake of the motors and the radiators, and apparently they put tape on that because they're changing the nose of the cars. They're not allowing teams to do that because they don't want the motors overheat and the radiators to overheat. But this is definitely really, really interesting, because tape can be somewhat of a competitive advantage for downforce and less downforce and stuff, and also can basically make the car a little bit easier to drive too. So that's something I think that is really, really interesting. They're not going to be allowing tape on the next-gen cars, but I think it makes a lot of sense when it comes to the radiator. You don't want that radiator getting really, really hot, and if it gets really, really hot, it could end up being a major, major problem down the line. So I think it's definitely really, really interesting. They're not going to be allowing tape on the next-gen cars, because I think tape could be a really, really important essence if you want more and more downforce and the cars to be cleaner. That's something that can be really, really cool. But at the same time, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to not do that if this is the reason that they're doing it. So I think it's a good decision in my opinion if that's the case, and it's a really, really good move in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Denny Hamlin's opinions on Kurt Busch. Now, Denny Hamlin was in the media center yesterday, right before they had the awards ceremony yesterday, and he had some really, really good opinions on Kurt Busch. He says, I underrated his talent. I worked with him at the Charlotte test. He's not good, he's great. He was faster than all of us the whole test, the Joe Gibbs racing cars. He's everything that his previous team said he was going to be so far. This does not surprise me. One, Denny Hamlin is, of course, going to speak higher of Kurt Busch because he is the owner of Kurt Busch now for the 2022 season, as Kurt Busch is going over to 2311 Racing. But I think a lot of people like Denny Hamlin, unfortunately, underrate the talent of Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch, I think, is one driver that is kind of unfortunately disrespected when it comes to his talent. You look at Kurt Busch, he's a NASCAR Cup Series champion. And it doesn't matter the equipment that Kurt Busch gets into. The guy can either go out there and win or contend for victories. You look at him historically with organizations. You look at his time at even Phoenix Racing, for God's sakes. He almost won a race at Sonoma in Phoenix Racing equipment, ended up finishing third in the race in a car that ran before not really, really well in the 09 times, when they back in 2009, 2010, when they only got one win, but with Brian Zosky, but they really didn't do much other than that in their respective times. And so Kurt Busch knows what he's doing, and getting into the next year, I think he's a driver that's going to surprise a lot of people. I think for sure he's going to win, and the fact that Denny Hamlin has a lot of respect for him does not entirely surprise me, and I'm not surprised that he does have respect for him, considering I think, of course, he's the team owner for the team. But at the same time, I think it's really, really cool to see that Denny Hamlin has a lot of respect for Kurt Busch. And the fact that he was even faster than Joe Gibbs cars throughout the test, not just when they had the higher taper space for the 670 horsepower, because I think they had it as well in that 2311 car when Kurt Busch was testing. That's cool to see, too, that he was faster. And I think Kurt Busch is going to surprise a lot of people next year with 2311 Racing. And I think he's going to make 2311 Racing organization as a whole a much better team and a much better organization. So I'm really excited about this, and I'm happy to see that Denny Hamlin has some really awesome and good comments about Kurt Busch for next year. I think that this is a really, really good story, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Miguel Paludo. As Miguel Paludo is going to be driving for Junior Motorsports for 3 races in 2022, driving the number 88 car with the Brandt logo on the car. He'll race at Circuit of the Americas, Indianapolis Road Course, and will race at Road America as well. Miguel Paludo made 3 starts last year, and he had his best finish at 7th at Daytona. He got involved in a wreck at Daytona, but he's able to rebound to a 7th place finish. Miguel Paludo is a driver that's won the Porsche Cur Cup in Brazil, and a driver that is very, very talented, who, like I said, made his return to NASCAR in 2021 and had a couple really, really strong runs in that series. Now, biggest thing, we already know that Junior is going to be driving the 88 car I think he's going to be running the 88 car at Martinsville with helmets on there. So I'm very interested to see if they're going to have a lot of a rotation in regards to drivers, like maybe like Kyle Larson comes over, runs some Xfinity Series races. Maybe Chase Elliott comes and runs Alex Bowman. Maybe William Byron too, among other drivers. We'll probably see a rotation of drivers in that 88 car and a 5th car. Maybe we'll just see this car for the only 4 races. But what are my expectations for Miguel Paludo? I think Miguel Paludo just needs to run as well as he can. I think if he gets top 10s, even top 5s in Junior Motorsports equipment, I think that's a really, really good runs for him. And I hope he does really, really well. So I want to see Miguel Paludo have a good opportunity, and maybe long term he could come back to NASCAR. He is a much older driver though, but I think he's done pretty well in the few starts we've seen him run, and I'm very happy to see that he is making his return next year. And again, he's going to 3 tracks that are definitely really, really interesting. He'll be racing later in the year, and I'm happy to see that Miguel Paludo is getting 3 starts next year in the 88 cars. I feel like he kind of got the short end of the stick last year, only running a few of the road course races, but I'm happy to see that Miguel Paludo is going to be returning next year to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to make a few starts. I think that this is really, really awesome. I'm happy to see that he is making his return next season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about DGR Racing, as DGR Racing has kind of somewhat revealed their plans for 2022. They are planning to run 3 full-time trucks in 2022. Haley Dean is expected to return to the team. It's not been confirmed if she will return, but very, very likely she is going to return to the team. Tanner Graham was already announced about a month ago that he would be returning to the organization, with Jerry Baxter working them as a crew chief. I think a great pickup for the organization. And Taylor Gray is expected to run 8 or 9 races in 2022, with other drivers to be determined at this time. They have a driver apparently, but they cannot announce who that driver is at this given moment. This does not surprise me. Hailie Deegan going back to this team full time. I think Hailie Deegan's actually going to do better next year, in my opinion. I think with Prax qualifying coming back, I do think that's one of the reasons why she has absolutely struggled in her time in the NASCAR Truck Series. She really struggled. I think a lot of it was the lack of Prax qualifying, because the second time we went back to Kansas earlier this year, from the time in October to the second time we went to Kansas, she actually ran in the top 10. As a matter of fact, ran 7th to 8th, and she had a pretty impressive run at Gateway where she was kind of running in the top 15. Then, of course, because of the big wreck happened, she was able to get her first top 10. She should have, though, had a few more top 10s than she had, but I do think next year she is going to improve in the NASCAR Xfinity Truck Series. And she's also potentially going to run some Xfinity Series starts next year. With what organization, that is to be determined at this given moment. But I think that this is overall a really good move that she is coming back. Taylor Gray running 8 to 9 races. She actually was supposed to run that many races in 2021, but remember, he got involved in that motorcycle accident that really hindered his opportunity to continue racing. So it's good to see that he's coming back. I know he's been very, very controversial with the way he races, but he's not eligible to run full-time. I believe he's going to be running full-time with DGR in the ARCA West Series next year. If that's not been confirmed, it should be confirmed really, really soon. But my question is, what other drivers are being considered for this car? Are they going to bring some of their drivers in their other pipelines in the lower tier series into the team, into the 4 development programs? Or are they going to get like cup drivers like a Ryan Preece? I could see Ryan Preece having a potential opportunity to get a DGR truck, since he is part of the KHI management group, and he actually raced for DGR Racing for one race at Nashville, actually 2 races, but 1 race and 2 races, and actually got a win with them in his first career Truck Series start at Nashville. So if they're going to consider somebody from the Cup Series to bring in for the rest of those starts next year, and they can't get him full time, I definitely say you have to get Ryan Preece to have an opportunity. And he's had conversations with teams, but I hope that in general, I really hope that we get to see someone get a good opportunity in this car. So it's really cool to see DGR Racing's revealing their plans for next year. I think that these plans are really, really awesome. I'm happy about this for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. As Bubba Wallace has an E60 special that is going to be coming out on December 14th. This is called The Fistful of Steel, The Rise of Bubba Wallace, which is going to be talking about the most polarizing driver in North America today. Bubba Wallace is probably the most well-known driver, while Chase Elliott is the most popular driver in NASCAR. Bubba Wallace is the most well-known driver outside of the NASCAR circle, and a lot of it is because of the situation that happened last year, but also because he got his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory at Talladega, which got a lot of media recognition because he was the first African-American driver to win a NASCAR Cup Series race since Wendell Scott did it back in 1963 or 1964. And I think it's really cool to see that Bubba is continuing to get this recognition, and I think it's cool that he has his own special coming out. It doesn't surprise me. I just wish other drivers would get special, like a Kyle Larson, among other drivers, to get a special. But it doesn't surprise me. Bubba Wallace is a driver that brings a lot of attention to the media and one of the most well-recognized people in the sport currently today. He's also got that Netflix documentary, the 2311 documentary, that is supposed to be coming out, I think, in January. I don't remember exactly which date that is coming, but there might be also some other filming that's going to be happening really soon in regards to that. And if that documentary does really, really well, which I think will do, I don't think it's going to have the same effect that Drive to Survive has, but I think it will have somewhat effect where we'll be able to bring new fans in. But I think you will see new fans come in from the special. I think there's a very good chance that that is going to happen. So I think overall it is a very, very interesting, and I'm very intrigued to see how this documentary goes, and hopefully it will do well enough to be able to give NASCAR some recognition going forward. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tyler Ankrum. As Tyler Ankrum is going to be driving a 16 for Tory Racing in 2022 with Lee Uena backing. Chase Purdy was already announced a couple days ago on Tuesday afternoon that he'd be driving a 61 for Tory Racing, which means the Tory Racing's Truck Series program, they are going to be expanding for the 2022 season. I want to talk about this for a second with Tyler Ankrum. I think Tyler Ankrum is better than Chase Purdy. That being said, I don't think that Tyler Ankrum is an amazing driver next year. And if I was a Tory, I would have gone off for guys like Ryan Preece. However, I do like said Tyler Ankrum has talent. He is a champion of the ARCA West, of the ARCA East Series, and he does have a Truck Series win, credit to him, with DGR Racing. I also think it's possible that Tyler Ankrum has struggled for the last couple years. I don't know if that 26 truck itself really was up to speed. I don't know how good the crew chief was for that 26 truck, but I think that with GMS, they were a little bit down last year, and Tyler Ankrum did have some pretty decent runs in the tiers, but he has been a driver that has been extremely disappointing. And his expectations, though, going into 2022, they are going to be very, very high because, like we said, he is getting into the truck that Austin Hill has driven for the last couple of years in 2019, in 2020, and 2021, where in 2019 he got 3 or 4 victories, in 2020 got a couple wins, and in 2021 was able to win twice, but unfortunately got eliminated in the round of 10. And then Brett Moffitt previously in 2018, where he won the championship. The two guys getting in these rides, they are in top tier equipment in the truck series. Not maybe in the Xfinity series, but the truck series, they are in top equipment and they're expected to perform well. I do hope they prove me wrong. I hope they do very, very well. I think that Tyler Ankrum potentially has a shot to prove me wrong going into next year. I think the expectations for Tyler Ankrum is he needs to win. He absolutely needs to win in the 16 truck. The last couple of guys that got in those trucks have been able to win. He needs to win a race next year. 100% must score a victory, in my opinion, to have a really, really good shot to be successful next year. As for Chase Purdy, he needs to contend for wins. He doesn't need to win, but he needs to contend for wins more than he has with GMS Racing. We got to see this team do well this year. I do hope they do have a good run. I hope that Tyler Ankrum and Chase Purdy do prove me wrong. But in my honest opinion, I'm not entirely expecting this team to really prove me wrong next year. But sponsorship matters a lot. But I will say Tyler Ankrum is a much better driver than Chase Purdy. He's not amazing by any expectations. But I do think that maybe he was affected by GMS Racing because you look at DGR Racing 2019 when they were coming up. He actually had a really strong run in Kentucky, won that truck series race, and he deserved that win. You can say all you want about that truck win. He actually deserved that win, in my opinion. He had the best truck in that race event and was able to get that victory. So, very true to see how he'll do next year with Vittori, but his expectations, like I said, are going to be really, really high, and he is expected to run really, really well next year. So he needs to do that next year for people that at least have some sort of respect to him going into next season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kevin Harvick and the next-gen car. Now, Kevin Harvick was speaking to the media, and Kevin Harvick says that the intermediate tracks, we need at least 670 horsepower with the next-gen car. And he says that the next-gen test, when the Fords got the 670 horsepower package, when they had it on the second day, they said that he had to actually lift off the throttle a little bit. And he said that when you lift off the throttle, that actually is a better thing. First thing I want to say is I 100% agree with Kevin Harvick here. I want to see more horsepower than 550 horsepower on intermediate packages. And I think that NASCAR is somewhat considering increasing the horsepower. Now, how much horsepower are they considering to increase? That is to be determined. One thing that also needs to happen is they do need to decrease the size of the sport. And when you have drivers in the sport saying that they want more horsepower on the cars, and drivers are giving good feedback saying, hey, we want more horsepower on the cars, and I think NASCAR might be starting to listen. Hopefully they are. And I hope they are, because I think NASCAR 100% needs to listen to the drivers a lot more than they have. And we've had issues with them in regards to the package, because NASCAR, I don't know entirely what they want in regards to the package, which is why I still think they added more testing, which you got testing coming up here in the next week or so at Charlotte for the 3-car organizational test, and then about a week or two after, there will be an action test, and then we'll have a Christmas break, and then come back right there to go to Daytona. But I think Kevin Harvick is absolutely right. That needs, for me, I'd like to see, if they can, 750 horsepower. If they get to 670 horsepower, if decrease the spoiler down to 3 or 4 inch spoiler, do what they have on the intermediate package, do what you have on the shorter tracks and the road courses in the short and other tracks as well. Make that 670 horsepower. In my opinion, if you could, make every track except super speedways 670 horsepower and 4-inch spoilers. But if you want, in my opinion, reduce it down more. 2 to 3 inch spoilers and 750 horsepower. Make intermediate tracks more horsepower, the better, in my opinion. And Dodge will probably be really, really happy. They wouldn't have to convert down to lower horsepower on the cars. So I still think Dodge is coming back. But I think what Kevin Harvick's absolutely right. The more horsepower you have on these cars, the better it's going to be. So I'm really happy to see that drivers are kind of agreeing with me on this. And I think that overall, this is a much positive direction. I hope NASCAR does listen and they go in this direction. To be perfectly honest, I think that they can. I think it's going to be better for the fans' experience, and I think it's going to be better overall as a whole. And now we're going to go ahead and jump onto the next story of today's episode, as we are going to go ahead and talk about international racing. It was reported yesterday by a couple days ago by Adam Stern. Ben Kennedy says that our international team thinks about how we might take NASCAR to other countries. There aren't that many already available racetracks in other countries, but there are a lot of these big venues for soccer. First of all, a lot of people, I think, misconstrued it. I think what they entirely meant is race-ready ovals, which is entirely true. In Europe, there's a lot more road courses out there than oval tracks. I think there's a few potential oval tracks out in the European area, and even in Japan and stuff. You have Tuimery Motegi that has one there. But in international racing, when they're coming to that, I think they're looking at what the LA Coliseum is going to do, which happens in about 2 months from now. And if that event ends up going very, very well, and it does great, NASCAR might look at other countries to go to internationally, like Canada, perhaps. Now, first thing, I think NASCAR will probably not go to Europe anytime, at least for the near future, but I think NASCAR is thinking long-term, big picture, and they're wanting to go to other countries across the world and across the borders into the European countries. I think they're thinking about that right now, wanting to go over there and go to like these soccer stadiums to have like the infield and stuff and go into those, just like we're doing at the LA Coliseum, which is an event that I think is going to be massive for people overall as a whole. But I saw a lot of people misconstruing the story because I think that's what they meant. But if they were going to go, there are a lot of tracks that I think if they were going to go to more road courses in Europe and stuff, you have track in Spain like Catalunya. You've got it up in Canada. You have Montreal, and you have Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, though it's unclear if they're in 2023. That track will even be available to run. That's one thing we're worried about. You also got in Mexico, you have the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track. And you've got other countries, too. If you want to fly cars over to France and stuff, you got the Le Mans track. You've got in Germany, the Hockenheim Ring. You also got Nürburgring that's possible to be used. And I think NASCAR is thinking about the long-term future, and you never really know what's going to happen. I think that's very, very possible, though, that we could see international racing in motorsports as a whole, which I think will be really, really cool if that can be the case. So that's something that we're going to have to keep our eyes on going down the road long-term, but I think this is really, really cool story, and I'm happy to see that NASCAR overall is considering international racing down the road. I think that if you want to grow the sport internationally, you have to go to other countries and other tracks, and there's a lot of fans from other countries. So I think that this is really, really awesome. I'm happy about this for sure. Now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 2311 and StarCom Racing. Now, it was reported a couple of days ago by Adam Stern that 2311 Racing, according to him, agreed to pay $13.5 million for the StarCom charter, one of the most expensive purchases yet since the system was introduced in 2016. And Denny Hamlin confirmed this yesterday right before the award ceremony happened here at the media center. That he confirmed that this was exactly the case. Now, I was very intrigued to see how much money came through, and we've heard recently that the charter money has doubled from about $6 million to about $12 million. But I believe that this is by far the most expensive purchase of a single charter for next year. They bought up the charter from StarCom Racing for 2022, and it's a partnership with Spire Motorsports. They bought up that charter, and that charter will be with Kurt Busch for the long-term meeting, and now 2311 will be a two-car team going into next year. So it probably also helped the fact that StarCom Racing got a lot of money was one of the reasons why they decided to sell, and they probably having discussions with them. Also, probably were at the time is having discussions with Spire Motorsports, but they probably also all agreed to come to the table and give that charter to 2311 Racing. So this is definitely really, really crazy that it's that much. And like I said, we've heard the pricing. We know that Call Out Racing, they paid $10 million for each of their charters, not just one charter. Each charter, they paid $10 million each. So probably around $20 million was paid altogether for those respective charters, which is definitely really, really crazy. And the charter system definitely has some benefits in a sense that if you can basically pay a certain amount of money, give it to a team, and keep all the entities and stuff and get the price back. But there are negatives to it where teams unfortunately have to shut down for other teams to fill the places. And that's one thing. I'm not overall entirely a big fan of the charters, but I do hope long-term down the road we can see the charter field expanded to a much bigger field. So I do think the charters need to be, I think if you want more teams to come into the sport, I think you have to increase the size of the fields up to 43 cars. And I think you do have to give more charters out. I think there need to be 4 more charters that go out. So one, teams can expand and get one of those charters for a certain amount of price, maybe a little bit lower of the price there. But that possibly is going to be something that's coming in with Dodge if Dodge does come into NASCAR. But I think it's absolutely crazy they paid $13.5 million. That is a ton of money. That is a lot of money. And I don't think anybody expected to see that much money come to 2311 Racing in general. So that's definitely really, really crazy that they paid that much money for the charters. And I think long-term, you're going to see much more money come out. I would not be shocked long-term down the road if you start seeing teams start paying like $15 to $20 million, even $20 to $25 million. And at some point, teams are just going to run out of money and they're not going to be able to buy up charters down the road. And the fact that it doubled as much as it did from one year to the next year, that's insane, and that's absolutely nuts and absolutely crazy. So that'd be a really crazy story for sure. They paid that much. I would have thought it'd been around $10 million, but they paid $13.5 million. That's insane, and that is really, really crazy, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, Kevin Harvick was on the Dale Jr. download. We talked about the other story. He was on the Dale Jr. download with Dale Earnhardt Jr., and he's just talking about his plans. And he said that he originally was planning to retire after the 2021 season, and this was in early discussions before he signed that contract extension through 2023. He had a contract going through the 2021 season, but we know that he signed a contract extension through the 2023 season. And up to that point, around 2019, he had been considering retirement at that point because of the finances up, and also because of his son, Keelan Harvick. The reason that he decided to stay through 2023 is because of the next-gen car development. Now, like I just mentioned, he has a contract that is signed through 2023, and he 100% sure plans to race through 2023. He also mentions after he does go ahead and retire, he wants to go into the side of broadcasting, but he says he loses that competitive edge going into broadcasting. But he's been a guy that's been really, really big fan of broadcasting. We've seen him broadcast a lot of races. We saw him lead the drivers only broadcast for Fox, and I think he did an extremely well job. And I think a driver that has a really, really good personality for broadcasting. And I think that eventually, long-term down the road, if Fox does need a third driver, depending on if they do get a third person in the booth, I think that they need to get Kevin Harvick up into the booth long term, as I don't want to see a booth just to Clint Bowyer and Mike Joy down the road. I think, no offense, Clint Bowyer and Mike Joy, I think Mike Joy can keep his own, but I don't want to see just two people in the booth. It doesn't work regardless. It's not like in football where you can get away with it. In NASCAR, you got to have at least three people in the booth. So I think it's definitely crazy that Kevin Harvick, though, was considering retirement from NASCAR after 2021. I mean, he is a lot older driver. He is actually right now currently the oldest full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver. He's 40. He's going to be around 46 years old here very, very soon. And by the time he does retire, he's most likely in 2023, which I think he is going to retire after 2023. Now, will he go on a NASCAR team or go in the booth? I think he honestly will not surprise me if he does reopen his NASCAR team in the near future, whether that's in the Cup Series, whether that's in the Truck Series or Xfinity Series. That would not shock me if KHI Motorsports eventually does return to the NASCAR fold in some sort of aspect or some sort of way. But I think it's absolutely nuts and absolutely crazy that Kevin Harvick was considering retirement from racing. I would never thought that after 2021 he was going to retire. I thought he would for sure was going to go longer, but I think it's crazy to think that he was considering retirement. But he then also said the people that he worked with and stuff also really helped him continuing. If you've not watched that Dale Jr. download episode, I suggest you go watch it. It is a very, very, really is a very good podcast, and there's a lot of things they talk about. They talk about the comments after 2017 that Kevin Harvick made about Dale Jr. on his SiriusXM show that he had back in 2017 when Jr. was going into retirement, and they talked about that. But the fact that Kevin Harvick was considering retirement is absolutely nuts and absolutely crazy. So definitely intrigued to see how much longer Kevin Harvick races, or if he gets extended. But I think that Kevin Harvick's going to retire after 2023. I know he said he wants to race for a lot longer than that, but I think Kevin Harvick retires after 2023. He's going to be 40 years old by that point, and he's going to be a much older driver. And like I said, he's getting very, very old. He's 46 years old. He's the oldest full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver, and I think that he will eventually retire from racing here long-term down the road. So definitely nuts, definitely crazy, and a crazy story for sure that Kevin Harvick was planning to retire. What's crazy is the final story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Richard Petty Motorsports and GMS Racing. As it was revealed on Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock that Richard Petty Motorsports has sold majority interest to GMS Racing for the 2022 season. GMS Racing, Richard Petty Motorsports, they are merging as a team. We don't know if there's going to be a new name or not. They will basically have two charters included into the organization, and there's more details to come in regards to this on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I believe it's going to be happening at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. That'll be coming on late Tuesday afternoon. The 43 is expected to be still with the RPM branding, and the 94 will continue to have the GMS branding. So one thing that really, really intrigued me in regards to that is it going to be, like I said, a new team going into next year, or is it going to be like they're going to be like sharing a shop or something like that? Because that's something we don't know. GMS, though, is going to be paying Medallion Financial, $19.1 million for the majority stake into the team, which I think they got a little bit of a deal considering charters, especially the 2311 charter was $13.5 million. They're basically getting it cheaper than $10 million for both of the charters going into next year. According to Adam Stern, also there were 5 bidders that were involved with the GMS Racing winning out of those 5 organizations. We'll talk about the 4 other teams that I think were involved in it. And it was also reported by Bob Pockers, and he had his agent, Eric Jones' agent. They're expecting Eric Jones that he will still be in the 43 car going into next year. This is absolutely and really, really huge for many, many reasons, because Richard Petty Motorsports, we all thought was going to be around, and they were going to still have a major stake in NASCAR, and they're still going to be around next year in some sort of ways. But the fact that they have sold their team to GMS Racing for next year, by the way, that's really, really shocking considering I didn't know that GMS Racing had that much money, considering they were downsizing their Truck Series team. There's a lot of things that are really, really confusing about this story, because I think a lot of people are really, really confused about it just because, one, are they basically going to be still the same team, or is it going to be still 2 separate identities with a branding and stuff? This is really, really confusing. What I'm getting from this is very, very similar to when Richard Petty Enterprises, Abraham, and Robert Yates merged into one organization back in 2008 to 2009. But back then, you didn't have that much. They had still a much bigger stake. So it's very interesting to see how much percent of the stake they have. I would assume that probably they would have like 80% of the stake, and then they would have 20% of the stake. But it's really, really crazy overall for sure. And this could have a major impact long-term down the road for Eric Jones down the road, because Eric Jones, he'll be back with the team next year for sure. But I think after 2022, I would definitely be really, really concerned if I'm an Eric Jones fan, because they're probably going to want to promote one of their guys from the Truck Series programs like a Grant Enfinger, or even, for instance, like a Chase Purdy or Jack Wood up to their Cup Series program. I know that sounds crazy, sounds nuts, but I think that that's something that they're making a decision on. And we all thought the Trackhouse Chip Ganassi deal was really, really nuts. At least that they're still going to be, at least with Rich Petty Motorsports, they're still going to be around in some ways, but they basically have laws. And Andrew Murstein paying $19.1 million is absolutely crazy and absolutely nuts. And I want to talk about the other 4 teams that I think were involved in the bidding as well, along with GMS Racing. The 4 teams that I think were involved: first one, 2311 Racing from the beginning before they got the StarCom charter. I think 2311 Racing was involved in getting that second charter from the Petty Ware team, which I think I would not be surprised if Rick Ware's team is also there, because they are basically have the Petty Ware deal, which I think that's another can of worms that we really don't know about. Is they're getting back to 51, or are they going to be putting that as the own Rick Ware charter, which means that we know for sure now they're downsizing one, even though we know that Rick Ware is going to for sure be a 2-car team next year at CMO. We now know where one of those charters is going to, and that's going to GMS Racing, which they bought up Richard Petty Motorsports for next year. So 2311 Racing, I think that they were the first team that was involved. Second team that I think was involved, Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of funding, and they're still wanting to be a 2-car team going into next season with the 77 car. They are probably most likely going to get one of the Rick Ware charters down the road, but I think that they were involved in trying to get that charter. The third team that I think that was involved, and this doesn't sound crazy, Junior Motorsports. I think Junior Motorsports is involved trying to get a charter. Junior Motorsports had probably been in conversations with that team probably up until about months ago, when because apparently this deal has been going on for about a couple months now. Junior Motorsports is probably in trying to get a charter from there, probably that 51 charter, and trying to buy up that organization. I just don't think they had enough money to fund it. Even though Junior's got a lot of money, they probably did not have enough money to fund that branding. And the final team that I think that was probably involved was MBM Motorsports. MBM Motorsports probably wants a charter. They know that they're not getting enough money, but I think they probably were unfortunately lowball, and they probably were not able to get enough money for the team. So the winning bid was GMS Racing, and GMS Racing is a team that I think has potential down the road, which means Eric Jones and Ty Dillon are technically going to be teammates next year. Nobody saw this coming. This silly season has definitely been a really, really crazy silly season. You think about all the moves that have happened this offseason. Kurt Busch to 2311 Racing. Brad Zossi going into an ownership stake, and Ross Jumby Racing and going into there. Trackhouse buying up the Chip Ganassi Racing Cup operation, and even in Trucks and Xfinity, so many crazy things. And this just adds to the crazy can of worms that we have seen this year in the NASCAR silly season, but this story absolutely just came out of nowhere. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and even insiders, no one saw this coming in any shape or form. This is definitely the biggest bomb, one of the biggest bombshells of the season. I think the Trackhouse Chip Ganassi Racing one and the Bragg-Zosky one definitely are take number 2. This one's number 3 of the craziest things this silly season. And we all thought at the beginning of the 2021 that this silly season wasn't gonna be nuts. Man, we were all wrong. This silly season has absolutely been nuts and absolutely crazy, and we'll hear more about this coming up here in a couple days. So anyway, that is it for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and notifications so you be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Rich Petty Motorsports selling to GMS Racing? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Kevin Harvick was thinking about possibly retiring after 2021? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.